And the recording is started. All right, so everyone, I want to welcome our very special guest, Aidan Hatton, with us. He is a producer for NBC Sports Boston. Aidan, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much, guys, for having me. It is an honor. I love what you guys are doing, and yeah, we'll talk about it more as we get into it. But I actually wanted to start this because when you reached out to me, Jared, about coming on the show, and one of the first things I found was the name of the show, Dunks and Donuts.
Right.
I was like, wow, that's a great. And I've told like 5 people that I'm going on the show, and so I was getting my coffee this afternoon at a certain place that rhymes with the name of the show, and I was such a big fan of the Super Bowl ad for this unnamed coffee shop,
Yes.
um, that I went out and I was like, you know what? I'll get a coffee and one of these Munchkin skewers that I've never tried yet.
Yes.
So this is going to be my toast to you guys for having
Yes.
me. And so I'll
The
toast the
elite
camera here
thumbnail.
with the Dunkin' coffee to say
Perfect.
thank you for
Yes.
having me.
Toast.
Also toast.
No,
There we
that
go.
is
There's your
that is
thumbnail.
Yeah.
awesome. And we appreciate the support. And honestly, it's an honor for us to have you on. Um, what you're doing, I think, is absolutely incredible. And like you said, we'll get into that here in a minute. Um, so I guess first things first is obviously Dunks and Donuts. You have your coffee, you have your munchkins. What's your favorite kind of donut?
That's such a
Oh,
good
man.
question.
That's a great question. That might be like the first. I'm not producing your show, but if this is like a great first icebreaker question
Yep.
to ask guests, because it's a stumper, I would probably say the glazed chocolate from Dunkin', where it's the chocolate and then it has the extra frosting on top. I've been in a big chocolate kick lately, so that would be my go-to.
No, that's probably one of my favorites too. I would have to say I'm a big sucker for the chocolate glazed chocolate donut.
Blueberry cake donuts slap. Blueberry cake donuts are
Oh, those
so
ones are
good.
too. Those ones are very good.
Another
Crullers are
great
so good. I could talk about donuts for a while. I'm sure you can imagine.
Yeah, considering you're the baker, that's where the donuts come
Yeah,
from.
exactly. Like,
Exactly.
if
Yeah.
anyone needs to waste about 15 minutes, we can go off. But I'll
When I
thank you.
realized that was the original donuts and Dunks and Donuts, that made even more sense. And I think on your first episode, you guys said the name makes sense for like 30 different reasons.
Yes.
It goes together so well. And another like full circle moment in my life that I wanted to share while I was on here was, so I hosted a college radio show slash podcast for 4 years when I was in college at Marquette. Go Golden Eagles. And the name of the show that I came up with was Games and Grub, and it was supposed to be like a sports and food type hybrid funny show. And so when you reached out and said, "Hey, the name of my show is Dunks and Donuts," first of all, it's first name is sports, second name is food.
Yes.
Second, it's D and D, which is the alliteration, just like G and G, and it was just like all full circle for me. So
This is another kismet moment.
This is-
I
it
love
really
that.
this
This is
is
great.
unbelievable.
This was like fate, right? Like this was fate
Yeah.
for us to.
It's all
to
lined
do
up a
this.
little bit too well when I was like, oh, so dunks and donuts. And I remember texting you, Jared, and I was like, oh my God.
Yeah,
Oh my
she was,
God,
like,
this is the
freaking out.
one.
She was like freaking out, and I'm like, "What?" Like,
I was like, wait,
because-
this is brilliant. Also,
Yeah.
I'm going to ask Twitter if I need to talk to any sort of lawyer about this because I know it's close
Yeah.
and I don't want to hear anything.
No, it was just so funny. Like when Ryan came up with the name, it was just like a string of incoherent text messages, and then like Dunks and Donuts, and I'm like, "Wait, what?" So it was this was such a great idea, and
It's
honestly,
great. I love it.
this has just been so fun.
I agree.
So we'll start actually. You mentioned you went to Marquette, and you said you grew up, or well, you didn't say, it's on your Twitter bio for anybody who is tuning in. Aidan's
didn't do
at
their
is on the
research.
bottom. Please go
Love
give
it.
him a follow all of the great content he's making. But your bio says you started in Boston, went to Marquette. So start there. Tell us a little bit about that journey, and was this type of work your initial goal when you first went to school?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question because was it the linear goal since I was like a little kid watching Celtics basketball? No.
Mhm.
When I grew up on Cape Cod, just in born right off the canal, and we were a Boston sports household, and like many others, and yeah, going off to Marquette, it was really really fun to be the kind of torchbearer for Boston sports in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I dealt with the Packer fans, the Bucks fans, and for the Celtics Twitter members who are listening, and you've probably had a lot of interactions with Bucks Twitter. They hate the Celtics more than any other team. And I feel like Celtics Twitter does not have the same animosity towards the Bucks. I love Milwaukee. I love the city. I love the arena because that's where Marquette played all their basketball games, just where the Bucks play. And so it was just great to represent every Boston team while I was out there. But no, from a career perspective, I actually started as a business major at Marquette, and I finished out my classes. So my diploma that's in the corner of my room here, I have a Bachelor of Science in Business Economics, which is crazy to you probably on the surface.
Yeah, I mean, just
But
in comparison now, yeah.
Yeah, it's not quite the same.
yeah, exactly. So that kind of was my initial background of like going to school, and I never really, even back in high school growing up, I never really had an idea of, oh, I wanted to do this certain thing and pursue this like one path. I know a lot of friends that do and did and are super happy. But the way I did it was like, well, let's just see where life takes us. And
Right.
it took us to the pandemic, which was in my sophomore year of college. And in the middle of that time, I was hosting the aforementioned Games and Grub college radio show with my two roommates, Brian and Zach. Shout out.
All right, Zach.
And they'll be listening to this for sure. And over that time period in the pandemic, everyone, not just me, had so much time to like sit back and have some downtime and like, oh, and for me, it was like, oh, what do I really want to do? And I had so much fun continuing the podcast while I was quarantined and, putting all this effort into like doing crazy audio editing and putting clips in. And we had so much creative control like you guys do to do fun stuff on a show. And I realized that, Marquette had a great communication school. I had seen it already in the work that I had been doing with radio, but that eventually led me to add a minor in digital media and eventually
that's
get more
awesome.
involved with the sports desk at Marquette. I actually got to call a few Marquette basketball games on the radio my senior year, which is amazing.
That's awesome.
And so that probably got more things on my like sports based resume. The other big, like huge break I had and a lesson that I just gave to somebody who reached out for a college project yesterday actually was, and he was like, asked me a similar question about my career. And I was like, things happen for a weird reason sometimes, because there was actually one school assignment where it was for one of my digital media classes to write an article about like a mock article about an industry you were interested in. And I, like a typical college student, I was right up against the due date and I was like, oh man, I got to get something done. And I ended up writing about, I was like, we got to just have fun with this to get it done. And I wrote about a sports radio show that I liked at the time, the DA show with Damon Amendolara, who actually used to work in Boston at 98.5 The Sports Hub. At the time was at CBS Sports Radio and now is at Sirius XM. And I wrote a little stupid article for school, sent it in, jokingly tweeted it to the show as a joke, like, hey, thanks for being a part of my first school project or whatever.
Yeah.
And I never got a response, like, comment or anything until the next morning when I was just listening to the show, walking to the coffee shop. I'll never forget where I was. I was in Milwaukee at the time, walking around. It unfortunately wasn't to Dunkin', but it was to another coffee shop. And I walked in and my headphones were in, and all of a sudden, just listening as I normally would, that morning, they started doing a full like 15-minute show segment on my stupid article.
Oh
And
wow.
like, oh my gosh, how great is this? Like,
I would have
this kid wrote
lost
an article
it.
for a class, and it was amazing. Like, and they made jokes like, this kid's more talented than half the guys we have working behind the scenes here. Like, we got to hire this kid.
Oh
And
my
I was
gosh,
like,
you
holy
must have
crap. Like,
freaked out. You must have
yeah, I was
freaked
just
out. That's
walking
so
around
exciting.
like I was just ordering my coffee, like, holy crap, I have to find a way to get in touch with them somehow. And eventually I got Damon Amendolara's email.
Wow.
We've kept, he was like, yeah, you can intern with us for the summer remotely because it was the pandemic. But I just had so much fun doing all that I can for them. I've actually stayed in touch with him. He's one of my biggest like professional mentors, and I'm actually working on his StreamYard show on YouTube that we're working on. So shout out to DA. I love you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And so there's so many like weird things that came together for me to get here. To answer your question in a very long-winded way, there was no like set path that I had from day one. I've always loved sports and Boston sports in particular. But everything has just turned into way more than I could ever have imagined.
Awesome.
No, that's like terrific. And obviously, I mean, you're living it, right? That's like the dream for anybody in sports media is you tweet out an article or a clip or something and you hope it falls into the right person's lap. And and that's an incredible story. And I'm really happy that you shared that because I know a lot of, obviously myself included, but a lot of people I know are trying to break through into the sports media world. And, there is success around every corner for everybody. And it always looks different, right? And for me, the biggest part is this podcast. I mean, we've released 2 full episodes, and obviously, like any show, there's some hiccups along the way, but it's been spectacular the feedback we've received. So it's just like I get it, and it's just such a heartwarming story. And
Yeah, when something picks up, it's a really nice feeling, but especially when you kind of had already done your thing and then you were just like had gone to bed, moved on, made your joke, woke up in the morning, and then to be so surprised with maybe the best possible outcome that you definitely didn't think was going to happen. It's just like it meant to be. Kismet again.
So you said your whole life you've been like a Boston sports family, grew up on the Cape. Tell us a little bit about that, like just being a kid, what's your favorite memory of dealing with the Celtics or going to a game or watching something? Like, what's your favorite memory that you have with the team?
Yeah, there's a couple that come to mind that stretch different eras.
And they
And
can be current too, by the way, because we'll break into that soon.
yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that there's a couple that I'll probably scatter around in terms of the timeline of my life. Being a Boston sports fan, as you can imagine, it's the best sports city in the country.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest testament to it from a professional standpoint is that we have the opportunity as podcast hosts, as producers, as what we do, to create content and do it and people watch because they care, and it gives us this opportunity, which is just so magical. So not many cities can say that, which I think is one of the beauties of Boston. But anyway, I'm looking actually at I actually have newspapers that my parents kept back in 2004, and I found in my bedroom closet in our house on the Cape a couple of years ago. And I was just doing some closet cleaning, and all of a sudden all these papers from the 2004 Red Sox and 2004 Patriots playoff runs are in this old shopping bag. I'm like, Mom and Dad, like, what? How did you get these, or why have I never heard about these, right? and they had just kept every single Boston Globe and Boston Herald from, specifically the 2004 Red Sox was one of, we were a big Red Sox family growing up, and their run from coming back from 3-0 and winning the World Series that year, and obviously keeping in touch with the Patriots, becoming a budding dynasty, basically a dynasty at that point, and just all the way through it. So those are hanging up on my wall behind me, and those will always stick with me. But so that's kind of like growing up. Who knows if people want to hear how old I am, but I'm only 23 years old. I was born in 2000, the same year that.
No, I feel old. Thanks.
Yeah, the same year that Bill Belichick got to the Patriots and he drafted Tom Brady. That was I was
like, you said 2005, 2006,
Yeah.
2004. I was like, I'm afraid that I do remember those years, so there might be some discrepancy.
Yeah. So I had always grown up, with especially in those early years, the Red Sox and Patriots winning, the 2008 Celtics. And from a Celtics perspective, one of the first games, this might have been even the first game I went to, was with my childhood friend, and we're friends to this day, Jack. His family had seats right by where the Celtics tunnel, they would run in and out from halftime and post game. And I forget what year this was. This was probably like 2011 or 2012. And the first, it definitely wasn't the first game I went to, but I remember, and I know that a lot of hardcore Celtics fans are listening that have been through some rougher years. So you'll remember the name Chris Wilcox. And he ran out of the tunnel after the game and took off his headband. He was bald and wore a headband every game. And he just tossed the headband up, and I caught it and somehow just like clutched it to my chest. And that was pretty cool. Obviously, it's not like, Paul Pierce's headband, but I was like, oh my gosh, Chris Wilcox. Like,
a headband is a headband,
Yeah, it's still with me somewhere. But that was like a first big Celtics memory. And yeah, being at NBC Sports Boston, we just, have so many opportunities to, number one, showcase the Celtics fans and deliver content that we think Celtics fans would appreciate, from our personalities with Mike Gorman and Drew Carter and Scal, and what we'll probably get into later, but also just our content outside of the games, what we can do from a production perspective. And going to a good chunk of games this year, I've had the experience of just walking around the concourse and seeing how passionate the fan base is, really how well run the organization is, to be honest with you, and just how professional and buttoned up everything is, but also the emphasis on having fun with it, really having the pulse of the Celtics fan base, and the two of you know that more than anyone. So it's just it's a blast to be. The memory that I think of as far as the future goes is later this summer, and we don't have to get into that too much, but just what that would do for the city, I think, is amazing based on the experiences I've had.
No, that is for sure. And now that I'm a little embarrassed to think of you walking around the TD Garden and me just being absolutely unruly, chanting in the hallway with everybody else. So no.
It's great. We probably ran into each other and didn't even know it. So
no, for sure. Actually, I'll tell you a little story. Last season I was at a playoff game and I ended up running into Scal. So my friends that I was with at the time, we went to the NBC Sports Boston broadcast. We got nice and close, and Scal he interacts with everybody, handshakes, high fives, photos.
He's so friendly.
And we got to you guys had finished recording, whatever. So they're clearing everybody out, and we're walking to the elevators to go to our car. And all of a sudden we just hear this booming voice goes, "Hey guys, what's up?" And we look, and Scal's just standing there waiting with us for this elevator. And it was just so like I was like starstruck almost because I just like that was just so cool. And then he's talking to us about the game, and he had asked me what I thought the most important part of that game was, and it was I believe it was game one against Atlanta. And Rob Williams had this like crazy block where like he blocked it, but he like curled it up under his arm, all in like one motion. So I said that, and Scal was like, "Yeah, I had just finished saying that was what the most important play of the game was to me as well." And then him and I started going back and forth, like talking about the game, breaking it down. And in my head, I'm like, "Is this real life now?" Like, I am breaking down a basketball game with Brian Scalabrine in an elevator. Like, this is crazy. And it was such an amazing time to just like experience that, and it was so cool. So like I get it, like the whole like just everything about TD Garden is spectacular. And Ryan went to her first game earlier this year.
It was insane. It was crazy. I've never been in a place that has such a consistent energy all the time, no matter where you are in the building, like whether it's just walking up the stairs, you can already feel what's coming. But it's crazy. Yeah, no. And I had the best time, my first game ever. And it was Marcus's return. And yeah, it was just really cool. Super grateful. I'm so glad that the Celtics play at TD Garden because it is such a beautiful facility in the first place. It's just gorgeous.
All right. So enough about us. Obviously, this is your time to shine, my friend. So walk us through this a little bit, right? Obviously, you had reached out to DA, you had that internship. So what led you to NBC Sports Boston?
Yeah, it's a semi-long. It's not really a long story, actually. I should be able to condense. I've done media before.
We got all night.
We got all the time in the world, my friend.
Yeah, no. So I graduated from Marquette in May of 2022, and the one connection that I had to NBC Sports Boston before going on the job hunt after graduation was that Trenny Casey had been a guest on my college radio show.
Oh, wow.
And Trenny actually graduated from Marquette as well. Shout out to Trenny. She is someone I can call a friend. We've actually just emailed and texted about all the Marquette basketball games that are going on, and ranked fifth in the. If you're listening to this right now, we're taping this, and they're ranked fifth in the country. I'm super pumped about their NCAA tournament expectations, so I expect both of you to be rooting for them.
Heck yes.
But
I'm a new number one
fan, but I'll make an exception as long as they're not playing the Tar Heels.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah. And basically Trenny was the one somewhat connection I had to NBC Sports Boston when I was just starting to get out of school and look at jobs. And of course I had an idea of looking for something in sports and sports media and sports production, and a producer role opened up there probably in early June or so. And I put my name in. I didn't really know Trenny that well. I think I had just sent her an email like, "Hey, if you remember me from 2 years ago, like when you did a 20-minute thing on my podcast, like I'm applying to this role, let me know, or if you can help or anything."
Anything helps.
Yeah. So I don't know if that helped at all. I'll have to ask her actually, because I've never actually talked to her about it since. But the way that unfolded was, thankfully, and DA as well had actually done some stints at NBC Sports Boston. He was back when we had the Revs soccer games. He was the sideline reporter. He was, as I said, a host on 98.5 The Sports Hub, so he had a little bit of connection to the management team. But I was not in any way like, oh, I got this in the bag, like at all.
Yeah, or you knew anybody specifically. Oh.
And there was and it was the summer, so people were in and out of the office. The waiting game of, and admittedly, it was the job that I applied to at that moment that I was most excited about. And it took me, that application process took months, probably a good month and a half, 2 months ish. got to the last round and didn't get it. And I was crushed because I knew I was at the last round. And so I was like, all right, it wasn't meant to be, turn your head to the next thing, and kept looking around at different opportunities. And eventually I, again, was really, struggling to find something or find what I was looking to do. Should I pivot to more business things? And, that was really scary. So for anybody who's out there that's going through that or whatever, like it's totally normal. You shouldn't feel like ashamed to do it, because it is really tough. And like I said, things happen when you probably least expect it. I remember I was back in Milwaukee for a weekend visiting my college friends, and all of a sudden I get an email from Brian O'Neill, shout out, who's one of the coordinating producers at NBC. And it was like, hey, Aidan, if you remember me, I wanted to know if you had time to talk on the phone. Just wanted to ask you something. Very vague. And I was like, okay, sure. And it turns out that they were bringing back their production assistant program at that time in the summer/fall of 2022 to bring back people on a part-time basis to help produce. And they hadn't had the program since the pandemic hit. And they were like, hey, we know that you just got to the last round of this this producer role. We gave it to an internal candidate, which I had no idea previously before. But I was like, I was just looking for an opportunity at that point.
Yeah.
And was like, yeah, of course. Like, let's do it. I commuted an hour each way, basically, from the Cape to
Good for you.
our Needham studios to make it work. And that's another thing. Like, some of the opportunities that you see in the industry they may not seem perfect on paper, but if you're willing to, like, if you don't have a linear path, like I was talking about earlier, and like a tunnel vision thing, which I did not, then thankfully I had the like riskiness to be like, all right, let's do this. And yeah, it's only part-time, but let's try it. And from there,
really is what it is, especially if you're kind of like making a really big decision and dedicating time and energy, especially travel wise, just to get there and show up. I think that's awesome. It's really cool.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it. It's it's good because just eventually I started doing the Felger and Maz simulcast like that we do, and just little things along the way, kind of growing in tasks from there. And eventually last season, probably around December, I started getting put on the Celtics pre and post game show to help produce with our fearless leader, Jim Aberdale. Shout out Max Letterman, who you guys probably know from Celtics Twitter.
I love
Max. I'll give any recommendation like for him to come on with you guys, because he is like the most open of books that I know, like one of the most open of books in the industry that I know, and just a great person. And I had the privilege of, some would say drawback, because he's such a talker sometimes, but I had the privilege of sitting next to him as we were doing these Celtics pre and post game productions. And he not only could talk basketball for forever, but he's also just a great life advice guy.
Right.
And we just we hit it off. I was able to do some things around the Celtics pre and post game broadcasts, and did that for, like I said, most of last season. We all were going through the first year of Joe Mazzulla, which was a little weird. We weren't sure how this guy was going to go. And he was, as people in the media and running the broadcast and, his interviews with Abby Chin, we were trying to figure out, like, how do we, what's this guy like? Is he dry humor? Does he like us? Does he not? But he really is. And Scal will actually say this to you too. He number one, knows basketball like the back of his hand. And number two, is really nice. I think I'll give him the flack of he was probably just nervous last year, thrown
I'm
into
sure.
the situation that he was thrown into.
Exactly.
But anyway, we did those, pre and post games. I was basically doing every game from, like I said, December until the wheels fell off against the Heat in June. And around that time, an opening for a full-time position came up in a slightly different department, but I still have a great hand on production, which I'm super, super, super thankful for.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I'm the production sales coordinator now. That's my new role, and I'm doing a little bit of like production / sales hybrid, but still have a footprint in every Celtics game from a production perspective. And so, yeah, it's a weird kind of path, at least that I think, but it's my path, and I love it. And like I said, I'm the luckiest guy in the world to have the opportunities that I have, and it's definitely, I can't take credit for 100% of it. But it's great to be, and the basketball. We'll talk about the Celtics. I'm sure it's just a bonus to be in the building and working for the broadcast for the best team in the NBA. That's a bonus.
That's like the cherry on top. That's just so awesome. I mean, I think it has a lot to do probably with your willingness to go with the flow, right? Because a lot of people are so structured. I'm a super structured person, at least mentally. So when
100%.
if there was a curveball, I don't know if I would react as well as you did to saying, oh yeah, maybe I'll jump over departments a little bit and still have my hand in it. Like, that's awesome. That's really cool.
No, and I going back to what you said about Max, I want to give him a shout out. Max has interacted with me more than a handful of times on Twitter, and we actually, I was talking about this the other day with somebody. When I was first trying to break through into being a content creator for the Celtics with writing articles and stuff, I was sending my portfolio to everybody. I was just sending it out like, how does this article look? Does this sound okay? And Max just happened to be one of those people. And he replied to me. He's like, hey man, like, I think this stuff's pretty good. He's like, but I'm not a writer. Like he's like, I have no say over any of that. He's like, but
Yeah.
He's like, but just the fact that he took the time to reply and, be considerate, I just thought was incredible. And then we've had a couple of jokes with actually the whole GIF thing when Drew Carter was on with Scal, and they were like tweeting back and forth. No offense to Drew, I had to take Max's side on that one. But
it was great. And I thought it was great that Drew on the air gave a shout out, like, man, somebody's got to take away Max Letterman's Twitter fingers and all that stuff. And he was like, yeah, he's great Twitter follow, which was great pub for him to have that on the air.
Yeah.
But Max probably, between Scal and Eddie House and Drew, Max probably gets enough on-air mentions, so we shouldn't blow up his head too much.
Yeah.
That is fine. All right. So before we actually start talking about the Celtics and the team and everything else, obviously we saw a little bit of a preview in the Celtics Bulls game about a week ago. Tell people some of the stuff that you're working on right now.
Yeah. So how this appearance with you guys came about was after I shared the first video that we produced of what we're calling meetups with Mike and Drew on NBC Sports Boston. So as one of our, Meet Boston, which is Boston's like tourism board, and I'm butchering what their actual organization should be called, but they're doing a lot more. They're pushing people visiting Boston, especially during the winter and the off season, actually, a lot more. And they're doing a lot of advertising across a lot of different platforms. And as part of their deal with us and with the Celtics was that we were going to create these. Well, first of all, they came in to sponsor Mike Gorman's farewell season, which we had been kind of shaping content pieces around since the summer, since we knew that it was going to be Mike's last year. And Meet Boston came on as a sponsor for it. We were super excited because Mike is born and raised in Dorchester. He's been calling Celtics games obviously for 43 years, and we were excited about the possibilities that could come from it. And one of the things that came from that partnership was this whole meetups with Mike and Drew content series, where, as like you said, Jared, as we're taping this, the first one came out on the 22nd of February against the Bulls.
Yep.
The next one I can spoil this. The next one is coming on Tuesday, the 5th against the Cavs. So you're going to see the next one there.
I will be so aggressive about that.
Yeah.
On the internet very soon.
Yeah. So, cause I know we're by the time you hear this, it'll already be out, but, yeah, so we're doing 4 pieces, that we taped, all in a day with Mike and Drew. And the concept is really about, again, having the Meet Boston backing. They wanted to, and we wanted to together bounce around a couple different neighborhoods of the city, and really like introduce Drew to Boston, because Drew's a Minnesota kid. Yeah. He had never really had any Boston experiences before getting the Celtics job. And on paper, I was like, this is great. We're going to be able to go around to different, like I said, neighborhoods. And they wanted to incorporate, again, spoiler, like some restaurants, but also like some entertainment and maybe a concert venue, and like ways that we can talk about the food scene and the Celtics fan base and how easy it is to navigate Boston and why you should come visit Boston, and how can Drew learn Boston a little bit more, and the food and the neighborhoods to get the best food and that type of thing. So with our connections with them, we were able to get into 4 amazing venues that you'll see on NBC Sports Boston going forward. The first one was at Alcove, which is just right across the street from the Garden. And, Mike mentions in there that, he has such a quick commute because he lives in that neighborhood to get to the game back and forth. And he mentioned the funniest part to me of that whole thing. Well, there's 2. The first one is when Drew says, "I don't know how to drive yet in the city," which is great. There's actually 3. Second is that when Mike says, "Oh, I finished calling the game and I walk back to my building. I get home and I see Scal still on the set doing the post-game show." That's because Mike Gorman has probably the shortest commute to work that one could ever have. Yeah. And it's great that he like gave that little inside scoop.
I was going to say it was kind of like it was an Easter egg, sort of. It was like,
yeah, it's a little Easter egg for people that notice.
That's funny.
Yeah, he's the best with storytelling, which I can get into more. And Drew, it was as I shared producing the shoots, and I texted this to Kevin Miller, who's our fearless leader on the sports side at NBC and the content side at NBC Sports Boston. He was like, "How did it go?" And I said, "It was great, blah, blah, blah," some other notes. And my biggest thing was like, Drew was really just a listener, which to me worked for the whole piece, because Mike is supposed to be the one, as we at least envision it, myself and the other producers on it. I'll mention Adam Hart and Ryan Proventure and Kevin Ducharme on the original content team that we have, and they edited the whole piece together. It looks amazing. I got a chance to see the second one that's coming out on March 5th, and it looks great. But what we all had in mind was just having this content not only to like showcase Boston for the sponsor, but also to have Mike give some like timeless words of wisdom to his new successor, if you will. And from an age difference standpoint, from an experiences standpoint, Mike has so much to give and was really willing to give. And so that's why I thought Drew being a listener was so perfect for the project because
Right.
he can learn and he's willing to learn just from knowing him a little bit. He's ready to soak in as much as he can about Mike this year, man. And he wants to make this year all about Mike Gorman. And we have some fun things planned for that. And yes, it was just a total thrill to be part of the project. It's probably it's one of the most time consuming things I'm doing nowadays, but it's also one of the most fun because I'm such a like sports broadcasting, sports media nerd when it comes to like, the players are larger than life, but I always grew up obviously listening to Mike and Tommy and the other Boston sports personalities we have on TV, radio. And so having Mike Gorman and Drew Carter by my side for a whole day of shooting these pieces was just a total thrill.
That sounds so exciting. That sounds so exciting. And I'm very similar to you in the sense of the media people are, really where like that draw is for me, right? Like, and even the guys you don't really see much, but you hear about them or they're writing, so they're not like in your face on TV. Like shout out John Corrales, Adam Taylor. Those are some of the guys that to me are the larger than life people. You know what I mean? So to hear that from somebody else makes me feel like not as much of a nerd. So thank you.
I think it's cool because
Totally.
to me, I'm not necessarily so much that way. My mom went to school for journalism and was a journalist and was a news broadcaster, but I'm very much the opposite of that. Like I could, and I don't mean this in any off way, but if I could turn the subtitles on for any game or TV show and kind of mute it, it wouldn't be the worst thing. And now, because of the Celtics community and how involved they are with the commentators and with the journalists behind the scenes and anyone in the media, really, even Joe has kind of a really funny back and forth, it seems, with once everyone found their rhythm with him. So what you're doing is such a good opportunity for people like me who do watch for the players, you know what I mean? And don't always think about the journalistic side of it to have more of a focus on two people, Drew, of course, who we're going to keep hearing from now, but to hear from Mike and get his side of it in more of kind of like a long-winded, eloquent way, while Drew kind of just sits there and listens and takes it all in. But it appeals to people like me who don't really know much about them. Outside of it, if I wasn't really looking for it or there wasn't a commercial that was played for me, I wouldn't have sought out any of that information. You know what I mean? And I think that's awesome because it does exactly what it's trying to do, which is inform everyone while also kind of making the city seem very accessible, easy to eventually get around, maybe for Drew. But yeah, that's just my 2 cents from someone that doesn't really see the journalistic side as close up. So I think it's awesome either way.
Yeah, that's why I was so excited to work on it because it hits the heart and like the human interest side of what we do and the journalistic side of things a little more. Excuse me. Because even if you're not the biggest basketball fan and watching the Celtics and there's a lot of those watching this year, A, because the team is so good, and B, like our ratings are in a great, comfortable place. We have a lot of people watching from a lot of different backgrounds. And when a piece like that pops up coming out of break, it's like, oh, let's learn about the human side of it a little more and who you're listening to on the mic. And Drew is someone, like you said, who is growing he's given shout outs to Celtics Twitter on the air and recognizing some personalities, and he's really trying to naturally, because he's a younger guy,
also that,
he has he's very social media savvy, but yeah, really wants to like ingratiate himself with the community, so that's been super special.
The first, no, and I completely agree. And I think I agree with Ryan. Like she said, it's special for the people who aren't like us, where, they're not watching for the same reasons we're watching games. And obviously the players have that it factor as well and that draw to them. But when you are trying to break in behind the scenes, it's a little bit different. So I 100% agree with Ryan's point. Into what you were just talking about, where Drew's shouted out Celtics Twitter during broadcasts. I remember his very first game that he called. Him and Scal had a debate about, or it wasn't even a debate. Like Drew brought up Marvel movies, and somehow Thor got involved. And this was the first interaction I ever had with Drew, and he didn't say my name on air, but he called Thor's axe from Endgame something different. And I just like the super nerd in me came out, and I was like, I have to go correct him. And he ended up saying like, "Oh, somebody tweeted at me, and it's this on air." And I was like, "That was me." Like it was just so funny.
Yeah.
And no, like the welcome that he's gotten from what I've seen, at least in like my sphere of people on Twitter and who are interested in the Celtics, even if they're not on Twitter, is Drew has such a positive following and feedback already. And this interaction in these videos that you guys are doing between Gorman and Drew, I think is just going to even elevate that to a much higher level, right? Like he already has this positive feedback and this kind of love about him already, that people already enjoy having him. So the more he learns from Mike and is able to develop into, obviously not a carbon copy of Mike, right? Because no one can ever replace Mike Gorman. We're just going to say that now.
Totally. 100%.
But having somebody be able to take those elements that people loved of Mike so much, and putting his own personal twist on it, I think Drew is going to be a very important piece to the Boston media going forward.
Totally. I couldn't agree more, Jared. He has been so well received in a way that even I wasn't really expecting, because naturally there's a lot. We love the Boston sports community. There are people, but when it comes to announcers, there are so many nitpickers and people that, oh, just another Syracuse guy and whatever. Like I thought there would be a lot of detractors that didn't even really give him a chance because he's not from here, and he is another Syracuse product, and he's whatever. But like, from the minute that we announced, we announced Mike's farewell season a couple weeks before media day, and then on media day or the day after, we put out the press release saying that Drew is going to be joining Celtics broadcast this season and eventually take over all the games next season. And we weren't sure what the reception was going to be. And frankly, we were a little nervous because
I was going to say that I'm sure that was stressful behind the scenes to kind of see how people are going to, if they're going to ingratiate someone, and, that must be difficult and nerve wracking.
Yeah, it was for me, at least because I am not only a fan of our work and our team and what we do, but part of my current job is working with sales folks. And so, let's keep sponsors happy. Hopefully they like Drew, that kind of thing. And when we first introduced Drew on one of our internal team meetings over Zoom, we had a little Q&A, like, hey, get to know Drew, whatever. And I asked him a silly question about broadcasters and anyone that he has looked up to. And he mentioned Mike Gorman. He mentioned Mike Tirico. He mentioned a couple other names that you would know. And I was like, wow, this guy sounds so great. He's 26, he seemed like a fellow guy in his early to mid 20s that was just moving to Boston at the same time. And I was like, hey, maybe we could be friends. Like, this guy seems great. Finally to like have this chance to really just hang out with him for the day for these shoots that we did. Was a total thrill. And to anybody wondering like what his personality is like behind the scenes or whatever, like I said, he was so willing to listen to and learn from Mike Gorman in these, on and off the camera. Even while we were driving in the car to different places, we're talking, old Big East basketball stories from Mike and music that Mike wanted to listen to on the drive and funny things like that. And but also he is just somebody that is so charismatic. He really wants to connect with the community. And from the outset, I think I heard him on another podcast say like, I'm going to try my best to not read any articles or read any tweets in case people say bad things about me. And but even from the media folks that I know that are outside of people that don't work for us and write about the trades and all this different kind of stuff, even the first few weeks of games with Drew were like, wow, this kid's pretty good.
Yeah.
And I had the same conversations with my dad who's watching the games, and my friends are like, oh, this guy's pretty good. And so, yeah, it's just a testament to his talent, but also his personality, which, he's willing to be so relatable with so many different kinds of people.
He seems so genuine. He comes across as so genuine and just, again, I mean, I'm a sucker for someone who's just really happy to be there, but he does just seem really happy to be there. And I don't know. I love that. That energy is infectious, especially when you're watching and listening to him call anything. And he's silly, but he's the perfect amount of silly while still not getting distracted and being able to communicate what's going on while still being a little bit funny. But that's super cool.
Yeah, he's that's actually, Ryan, like the perfect way to probably describe Drew, and his status is like happy to be there, because I remember there was a game, and you guys might have been watching the same game. I can't remember. I think it was during the West Coast trip in December. And there was a green light special, Scout's favorite. And we were talking about something, and I think it was on the West Coast trip, because there was a little banter about like, what'd you do in California? And just went on some walks and explored the city and whatever. And Scal just like stopped for a moment as the refs were probably, reviewing a tipped out of bounds play, and was just like, you're always happy, dude. Like, how are you always this happy?
I remember that.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, Jared remembers. And I remember just sitting there watching it like, yeah, like, and that seemed like a good vote of confidence from Scal, that he, has trust and respect, right, and, likes his new partner, because hey, if the guy sitting next to me always happy, then that must be a good sign,
Exactly. And a nice nod to him in kind of like a quiet way, just saying like, yeah, you're always happy is nice to be around.
Totally.
For sure. Now, obviously, we did talk a little bit about Drew there for a minute, but again, this is your time on here. So, and obviously, like we talked about, and Ryan and I have been kind of pushing this. We're more interested in telling the community story, right? Like about the Celtics nation as a whole. So specifically with Celtics nation, Celtics fans, whatever, and this can be in person, it can be on social media. What's your favorite memory of interacting with Celtics nation?
That's a good question.
And I'm not trying to plug anything. You can say this, by the way.
That's a really good way to say you're not trying to plug something, Jerry.
This is up there because like I said, I've never been, I don't have a ton of experience being a podcast guest before, let alone a Celtics podcast, and how rabid the fan base is. So thank you again. I think that some of the best memories I've had are ironically outside of Boston and when I was living in Milwaukee at school, because I remember in my 4 years at Marquette, I think 2 of those years there were Celtics Bucks playoff series.
Right.
And specifically in 2022 in the semifinals, it went to 7 games. The Celtics were actually down 3-2, going back to Milwaukee. And there are a couple funny stories I have about that series. But my answer before I tell too many stories is that the interaction with the fans outside of, or I should say in the state of Wisconsin, were like either people that I had gone to Marquette with that were from Massachusetts, or, Celtic fan transplants that were living in Milwaukee at that point. It's just so, I always love going to another city and wearing a Red Sox hat or wearing a Celtics sweatshirt, and people will be like, hey, let's go. And I always love that. And this particular playoff series, or those Celtics Bucks matchups, were so great because, I'll brush past the other matchup that they had with the Bucks, which I think was in 2020, because they won game 1 and I was on top of the world talking, to every of my Bucks fan friends, and then they lost the next 4. So, but that was the Kyrie era, and that was then. This is now. In 2022, they go to Milwaukee for, I think they were in Milwaukee for game 2 of that series. I think Milwaukee, the Celtics had home court. Basically, there was a game in Milwaukee, and the Deer District has gotten a lot of fame out there for their 2021 championship run, and just how it is an amazing venue. I love being outside there, and they have huge TVs and entertainment and beer vendors everywhere, and you can have a great time. It's almost like you're at the game. And I went to their Deer District for one of these Celtics games, wore a Jason Tatum jersey. It was like one of the first nice days of the spring/summer out there. And I had never been to an away sporting event like that, where I was one of the few Celtics fans there. Usually I have either my friend from Boston or what with me.
You don't come alone.
I wasn't totally alone, because the ones that I did find, those are the interactions I love the most. Like when you're in enemy territory and, hey, let's go Celtics. Yes. There was this road game that I went to, and amidst all of the, junk I was talking to Bucks fans, turning around in the crowd, hey, Jason Tatum just hit a 3-pointer, all that. They ended up losing that game actually to the Bucks, and I got like beer thrown on me, and I was trying to like get out of there and just walk home peacefully. But those interactions that I had with the fans were some of my favorite, and went back there. So that's probably like number 1. And within that same series, this is what I mean about like being lucky, and I've just had so many things, like, God's been good to me. Like there's so many places that I've been super thankful to be in. And one of them was game 6 of that series when they were down 3-2. And Jason Tatum has, I think he had a 40-point night.
46 points that night. I remember that game like it was yesterday.
So
we're fine. We handled that well.
Out of a weird, like crazy circumstance, I was at the Tatum 46-point game, but I didn't have a ticket. We had these friends at Marquette who had this connection to a agency or security organization that ran all of the ran all of the metal detectors in the building in Fiserv Forum, and they needed extra set of hands during the playoffs to come in and move the wand and like be a security guard glorified for these games. And my friends had passed it off to us like, hey, they're looking for people. They actually paid you like $13-14 an hour. It's like getting paid to do this. And we found ways to, and I hope they're not listening now, like sneak in once allegedly, all the fans entered the arena, it was like middle of the first quarter, maybe second quarter. and your job was done. And we found ways to go down to the alleyways where we got our black security shirts, clock out, and make our way up back into through the recesses of the arena and Pfizer Forum into back up to the court. And usually we'd just be in standing room. Maybe we found a nosebleed seat and we would just watch the rest of the games. And one of the games that we got to do that was Tatum's 46-point game, and they ended up winning Game 7. And that seeing the Celtics fans there was so fun. I wasn't able to wear any Celtics gear because I had the security shirt still on. So it makes me laugh to this day.
That's right up your alley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's something I would do 100%.
Those two memories from that series just contribute to my answer of saying, like, my favorite interaction with Celtics fans and Boston fans has largely been like in enemy territory, which I think is unique and cool.
Right.
It stands and says a lot about Celtics fans themselves, because you have to be super passionate to go out still, especially in enemy territory. And the people that you meet that are also willing to do that are definitely worth keeping as friends.
I was about to say something similar, right? It's like we see it on TV all the time, just how well Celtics fans travel to begin with.
Yeah.
So it makes me really happy to know that, like, somebody who has actual experience going to these away games and being able to interact with those fans, and that it's such a good, it seems like such a good experience as it seems on TV. So that is absolutely awesome. So before we wrap this up, because we've been on for about an hour now, first off, Aidan, again, I want to thank you for coming on. Like, your story, to me at least, is inspirational, right? Like, yeah. I've been through some of the same hurdles that you've gone through, and I get it. Like, and what you're doing now is just incredible. So before we wrap this up, is there anything you want to say? It can be about anything. It can be about your life, any advice you want to give, just anything you want to say to you, whoever's listening.
Oh yeah, or plugs, anything you're working on that you can list off the link or at really quick. That would be awesome, because
I mean, you guys did most of the work for me, and I want to say first and foremost, thank you to both of you for having me on this podcast, because, like I said, it was a huge thrill. I was not expecting it, which I think from a like you said, career and advice perspective, some things come when you least expect, and this was one of them. So thank you in advance for that. And I think the only thing it's funny because the only thing I'll plug is continue watching the Celtics on NBC Sports Boston. We have so many great games coming up, and we were actually just talking about this in one of our meetings today. Like, the schedule in March is loaded, and there are so many fun games coming up with, the Mavericks on Friday, Warriors, Suns coming to town, Bucks here again, Nuggets. I mean, there's so many good ones in March that we can look forward to. Some fun road trips. So, like, after dark, Celtics Twitter can be up at 1 a.m. for those West Coast games. Yeah, Jared's getting a fist pumped. So, continue to support what we do, because we are trying every day to, and this is not just me. I would be remiss if, like I said, I've hopefully given shout outs to a lot of really important people and people that I love within our four walls, because there are so many people at NBC Sports Boston and at NBC Boston in general, in our Needham facility, where we have so many people that are trying to hit the pulse of the Boston sports fan base, and most importantly, the Celtics fan base, as accurately as we can. So this series that we talked about a lot with Mike Gorman and Drew Carter has been a total blast. We have some fun things coming up with Scal. We have some fun things coming up with, what else can I plug / support?
Whatever you can share. Like, obviously, I don't want you getting in trouble for.
No. I think that's basically it. We have some fun. We're always coming up with new content opportunities, and yeah, this will be, like I said, the next institution or release of meetups with Mike and Drew will be on Tuesday, March 5th for the game against the Cavaliers. Yeah, you can. Jared does the work for me. You can follow me at Aidan T. Hatton on X/Twitter, whatever it is, Instagram. Yeah, I just appreciate you guys so much for having me, and looking forward to a good rest of the season.
We are as well. And again, for everybody listening, Aidan just mentioned his @ I put it up again just so you guys can see it.
Yeah, and I'll link everything on YouTube and obviously on Twitter. And yeah, I'll make sure I'll link everything. And then I have a question for after we're done. But
perfect. So I'll end the recording now.